Hello everybody, welcome to Eigen TV. I hope that you have had a wonderful Christmas break and this is our first episode of 2021 and today we're being joined by Adam, who is the Facilities Technology Manager at BP, and we've got a great topic for you all. I know how much you all love the digital twin conversations that we have, so I'm really excited to open this year with our first episode on digital twins. So I'll hand over to Murray to kick us off.
Thanks, Effie, and welcome, Adam. It's great to speak to you. And so I thought I'd just open up with, if you could just tell us a bit about your background in working with digital twins at BP.
Okay. So there's a short version and there's a long version. I'll give you the short version. Otherwise, I think our time will be up. I started in BP in 2002. And I started in our technology group doing hydraulic simulation work for subsea systems, mostly designing new subsea systems, but also troubleshooting where we were having issues on existing subsea production systems. So I would say, to the kind of the truest of the digital twin, I would say that's when I really started, right? I mean, I'm using a digital tool to design a system. And I would say in support of the production systems that were already in place, that would be even closer, right? I was using actual as-built information, building my subsea system, replicating the fluids as much as possible, and utilizing real-time process data from that to either match it, and then extrapolate using the physics, right? To help suggest different ways to operate it to either get more production or minimize issues they're having. And that was probably the extent of that in that role. I went into a wells role doing artificial lift and I replicated that type of work there, really trying to understand. And what I really got, to be honest, was where these hydraulic models were good versus where they weren't good, and what they could do and what they couldn't do, which is probably a whole different conversation, so I won't go there. Coming out of there, I went into a site engineering role. So I was a site engineer, a production engineer on our Pompano facility in the Gulf of Mexico. And it was a great facility in that it had subsea systems, it had dry tree wells, and it also had a 30-mile tieback, the Mica tieback, which one side was gas, one side was oil. So you saw a lot of different dynamics from this system. And the top side was, I would say, just as complex. And so one thing I did while I was a site engineer was I built models of it all, of the subsea kit, of the wells, as well as the top side system using a HYSYS model. And basically using the technology of the time, which was Excel, was able to access all those models, link them into the Excel spreadsheet, pulled in the process data, and could actually replicate the dynamics of that system. And I would use that, right? Because just doing that is an academic exercise. I would use it as soon as I got out on hitch and at least every few days to basically determine, are we maximized in terms of our production? Do we need to swap wells here or there based on different constraints we were having, whether that be water, gas, or any other constraints based on equipment that's down. So I would say there, I really kind of was able to get that digital twin running. And when I say digital twin, a very specific case of a digital twin in which I'm pulling information from the real, I'm combining it with putting relationships on that data using physics, and actually using it to tell me, is the system operating the way it needs to operate? When I came out of that role after about 1.5 years, I went on to Thunderhorse as a flow assurance engineer, flow assurance / process engineer. And for about 3 years, we were projects, but for about 1 year after startup, I was the flow assurance engineer on the system. And again, utilizing this digital twin, right? I had the design models, the subsea kit. I had process data flowing in. I had HYSYS model. of the top sides. And I knew all the relationships of what should be happening, to where I brought all that in, again, using, high-tech technology at the time called Excel and the very powerful VBA underneath it. And basically brought all that together to do the same type of things. Tell me if things are going the way they're supposed to be going. Ultimately, that turned into, because I always like to build on top, ultimately that turned into me not having to even check, right? It would text me, it would email me when things weren't going the way they were supposed to go. Back in those days, not everyone on the that's listening to this may understand this, but we used to have desktop computers back then as well. And so I had a desktop right next to my desk, and I would run this thing. I usually had it, on a frequency of about every 4 or 5 hours, just run and tell me, wake me up, right? Since I was supporting that facility. And tell me when something's wrong, and then I can go and investigate. Ultimately, that even went further, right? Utilizing all the information. Ultimately, where that went to was, not only would it tell me when something was wrong or something was not as I would have expected. This chemical should have been injected at this rate, but it wasn't. That pressure should have been this, but it's gradually getting higher with no other indication of why. After a while, I started coding in my thoughts, my logic, my physics, my experience into, well, what should I go do? What else should I look at? To where ultimately this master spreadsheet, if you will, would actually go and pull new information and start recommending to me what to do. So when I would come in the morning, if I didn't get a text overnight, this spreadsheet would be popped up, or actually the spreadsheet would every morning create me an email with a PDF of the report, and basically all the anomalies that were found, as well as recommendations for what needs to happen. So I know that was kind of I said that was the short version, but it could go much longer. But I would say, from there, that's kind of at least from my view of a digital twin, that's kind of my experience in that space. I could go on with other stuff, but it's more up the creaming curve than that work there.
So that's so interesting. And in many ways, you've basically described my career early on, a parallel career, flow assurance, connecting Excel to HYSYS, writing reports that automatically pulled the data. And so this is something that I've heard repeatedly through the industry. It's like, well, we've always been doing this. So is it a case of like, we've always been doing digital twins? What's different? Or was it certainly was never called a digital twin when I was doing it? It was just, you were just making something like a tool for yourself and to do it. So I guess some interesting threads we could go from here. One is that the language of the digital twin. When did you first start hearing that?
Yeah, I would say to the question, at least, I've probably started hearing it about a year or two ago. It feels like, certainly within BP, and it's very much everywhere that someone had something digitized was the digital twin, right? And whether it be a production simulator that's running, doing an optimization scenario, or whether it be a flow assurance simulator, just estimating what the no touch time would be if that site or that system were to shut down unexpectedly. Yeah. And I think certainly within BP, but even, what I'm seeing online is as I'm reading through quite a few different papers on it, I think the definition of digital twin is still somewhat of a haze, because everyone's got their application of a digital twin, and there isn't necessarily a broader view of it, right? A reservoir model that I history match every quarter or every year, in that respect, is a digital twin. You're bringing all the data together, you're putting the relationships with the physics, with rules, logic, and anything else and you're actually more knowledgeable coming out.
Yeah.
To me, that at the fundamental level, that's the digital twin.
It is. It's something you said earlier makes me wonder if there's if you've hit on something that that is really what's going on, because what you've described is what I think a lot of people were doing in their own situations in different ways. I've seen it in lots of different places where really smart people use the tools available to them to make some really cool stuff, to make their lives better, to make them do their jobs better. But what you end up with is a tool that only you know how to use. So what happened to those tools when you moved on from the role? Did the next person come make their own spreadsheet, or were they able to take yours? Or
yeah, I mean, that's a great question. You know, I will start the answer with everything starts simple, and if you can't bring people along with you, then by the time you get to the product, it's too complex for everyone else to get to.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I found. I mean, that's the case whether you're developing strategy or in just about anything. Bring people with you. And so when I went into the engineering manager role, that was my first task: is who do I give this to, right? Because it needed some maintenance. If you've got a new well coming in, it needed to be added. And what I found was it was too complex at that point. It was just too complex. And because it was Excel based, it also had way too many switches in my Outlook. It had too many switches going on in my PDF or Acrobat to be able to do the things I wanted to do, to where anytime an update came in, it was dead for whoever didn't know how to change it. And so, yeah, so it died on the vine, right? And I think most of those tools do, because it is this person's view of what they need to help them. And you know, interestingly enough, I know we say this a lot, but everyone is unique, right? So everyone's twin or everyone's tool that helps them is going to be different. And so, and that says something about what do we need to do going forward to make sure we're capturing everyone's uniqueness and getting the common set, if you will, of tools that can be used by everybody. Because a certain graphic is appealing for one person, it's not for another. It's insightful for one, it's completely dead for another. So.
Yeah, I think that's actually the key. So I was going to ask you the question, so what's different now? And I feel like maybe I should have a go answering it first, and then based sort of maybe as a kind of reflection back, and then see what you think. Because what it feels like is actually we're trying to do the stuff at an organizational level that we used to do at the individual level, because we've all been through that experience you've just defined there or explained, that the tools did exist to do it for you. So you could do it on your desktop, and it wasn't cloud based, only you could access it because a lot of it's maybe stored on your C drive, but it did what you needed it to do. But then, as you say, you get to a point where you can't go any further, or you move on in your role and it's too complicated to hand over, and the next person comes in and they go, I don't understand that, I'm just going to make my own. And they start from scratch, and in the process of making the tool, they understand the job better, and it goes along with their level of understanding of the job. But I'm wondering, is what's different now that we're trying to make that learning available as an organization so that we can all move on? I guess we've got people, a lot of experience leaving the industry. It's not such an attractive industry for folks to come into, because there's the talk of the investments leaving, but it's going to be around for a long time, and there's a lot of transferable skills that you can learn here that you can take to other industries. And also, I think a lot of the skills from this, like dealing with flows, are relevant anywhere. We talked about carbon sequestration previously. So but anyway, in order to keep being competitive and efficient, companies need to be able to do what they used to do, but at a lower cost, and move on and use their people to do the new stuff. So all that kind of low level stuff that you're talking about, the monitoring, the tell me if it's okay stuff, is it what we're trying to do is what we could do previously, but we're trying to do it at a much more open or general level that's accessible to everyone and doesn't depend on individuals anymore.
So what's the question? I fully, no, I'm kidding, Murray. I fully agree with what you're saying.
So I think it's like, this is what's different now. If I was to say, what's changed? It's like, well, we're still trying to do the same stuff.
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, what's changed is, I would say, a couple things, right? You know, if you were to go and look at the tools that different engineers, in this case, were using, they would look different, right? And that's based on that uniqueness, right? Is someone, you know, two different rotating equipment engineers, you know, monitoring, rotating big packages out at sites, they may be looking at different things in regards to the health of that turbine or that export pump. One may be looking at maintenance records as well, right? One may not. They may just be looking at process data, the pressures, temperatures. You know, one may have a better understanding of the cause and effects associated with that package. The other may not. And so when they build those tools, they've got different information in those tools, different data sets coming in. And I think, I mean, golly, this one jumps off into way too many directions to go into. So I'm going to jump into two. One direction, I'll just say, building a digital twin at the federal level. So this is across your organization, across your sites, your facilities, enables a learning culture, right? I mean, a lot of times we say, oh, I mean, you need to bring in so-and-so because they've got a lot of experience. That experience that person has is really you're only getting the value at an organizational level by bringing that person in. You know, you can have them write that down into lessons learned and whatnot, but it doesn't really, it's a document sitting somewhere that someone may or may not, most likely not, go and look at. And even if they do, they're not just necessarily going to latch onto it. So having this stuff codified, you know, that experience isn't, look, there's no engineer out there with a crystal ball that just says, what should I do next, right? No, they're looking at data, they're applying their engineering judgment. Engineering judgment is nothing but a bunch of rules and physics. They're applying their experience, right? Which is nothing but a bunch of previous experiences they've had, incidents that they've observed and that they've latched onto and remembered, and basically using all that to recommend a way forward, to fix something or to optimize something. So having a digital twin, something to codify this learning, take what both these rotating equipment engineers are doing and combine that together. Together, you have actually better than either one, right? Because each of them is coming from a different angle. This engineer, you know, actually started his or her career in the maintenance area. That's why they're looking at maintenance records. They know that, you know, half the time that you've got an issue on a compressor, when it's vibration, it's because I just did maintenance on it and I didn't bolt it up correctly. So I'm looking at those type of things. This one may be someone that's more started in the process engineering role. So they're looking at it. That's why they're looking at it from the processes and looking at pressures, temperatures, because that'll be my indicator. You may even have another one that started their career on the site, right? I want to see pictures of this thing. I want to see video to see what's going on, because I know that what's on this drawing in front of me is just an academic representation of what the real world is. There's a huge gap between the two. And so bringing all that together, you know, that's where the value really lies. And so what's changed, right, to be able to enable that, in my opinion, right? I think it's the availability of the data. That's a big one. You know, back in the day, it was, I mean, half my time bringing in all this data for my twins, you know, it was, you know, cashing in favors to get access to our maintenance system so that I could, you know, query it through APIs and bring that data in to my spreadsheet. It was, cashing in favors to get new tags that didn't have new process information in, that while it was out on our historian offshore or on site, it wasn't making its way to Houston. So it was, getting that connection in so that I could have that data. It was hard coding, procedures. It was hard coding cause and effects into this spreadsheet. Right now, all that's available. I would say 15 years ago, you had to know who to go to get that information. Today, it's relatively open on the cloud, and that's where I see a lot of companies are starting to get all their information out there. And so, the logical next step is now I need to connect it all up. That piece of data is actually that transmitter's on that equipment's on that system. That equipment, here's the maintenance records associated with it, and so on and so on and so on. You could get it down to even, that equipment is, has a risk reduction factor of this in my LOPA study, so I need that working. And so I think I would say that's the main change that's happened, as well as, look, if something is simple, and by no means am I trivializing this, as Power BI. If Power BI existed back in the day,
wasn't that long
I'm
ago.
still a young engineer, right?
Yeah, that's right.
If Power BI existed, I wouldn't have been using spreadsheets. That would have all been coded up in Power BI, right? And it would have been more sustainable in that sense. So let me back up a little. Data availability, and I think the other key aspect, look, I'm an integrator, and I think the more you can bring people together, or the more broad skill set you have, the more powerful you can be, because you know enough about what you can do and when you need to go to somebody versus it's simple, you can do it yourself. I think it's that integration as well. I can certainly speak for BP in building out a digital organization, with your ITNS folks and your data scientists and bringing these people in, right? The more you silo them, the less product they're going to create that you're going to need. And so the more you can bring that together and have those conversations face to face via Teams or Zoom, the quicker you get to solutions. And I'm seeing a lot of that. I'm seeing a lot of that now, where, products aren't developed through ITNS and you now need to implement if you're an operator or if you're in operations. It's more collaboration. So I don't know how many programmers I've gone to in the past to try and program up spreadsheets that I've had, and you start with that context session and you set up the scope, and then a few weeks later they come back and it's not even close to what you expected, right? And so I think that agile way of working, getting in there and really just getting that team together so you have all faces and all the context of what you need, and therefore what you need to do. I think that's changing as well, which is enabling quite a bit of it.
So is that an attitude shift to actually what it takes to engineer? It's like software engineering now. We're actually having to engineer this stuff. There's a recognition. It's not just just give it to a coder, because you don't get back. There's so much engineering expertise gone into it.
Absolutely. I think a lot of things have come together, and it's enabled that mindset shift, that culture shift as well. Yeah. So, yeah.
So whilst you were speaking, I was just jotting down some thoughts, because I actually wonder if you've hit on an alternative definition of a digital twin that we haven't had yet. So I wonder if what we're saying is a platform to codify knowledge and experience, and then this is the key bit, and make sure it's incorporated automatically in future decision making. So
I could see that as one potential definition. Absolutely.
Because what you're describing is the case where we do have processes to try and learn the lessons, and it's written down, but then these things get so big, it's like a forest, and you just lose the will to live when faced with it. Someone says, well, have you checked the lessons learned? And you can see everyone go, no, I haven't. I was hoping someone could just tell me, because to actually sift through that yourself, it's very, very time consuming.
Well, and it's subjective as well. Learning is a huge passion of mine. More, one, just self-learning, but also just organizational learning. And I'll tell you, when I was in projects, and I continue with my friends in projects to tell them, your lessons learned database is the MOC database for operations. Wherever operations is having to change your design, that should be a lesson for you, right? Or the incident database, right? Is go through that incident database, and what you will find is how I can design this better to prevent those incidents. But instead, we create another system, as you said, which is not effective, I would say. It's more of a, it's more of a, let's make sure to document it, right? And then someone downstream will do something with it, of course, but I'm not a part of that. So
I think that's part of the great charade that we've all played in the and it's along with stuff like the announcements at the train station because it's delayed due to a customer incident. Phrases that you're allowed to say that magically mean everything's no further questions will be asked. And it's like, have you documented? Yes, I've documented it.
There, check, I'm done, right?
That's the end of it.
Let me move back on to my day job, whatever that is.
That's right. Whereas the reality, of course, just because it's in a document doesn't mean someone's going to read it.
Oh man, I've created many documents. Well, and just because it's in a procedure doesn't mean it's going to get followed either, right? And I would say that's another value of the twin, right? Is if you think about and I used to do this as a flow assurance engineer, certainly you would know this, that you either design the issues out or you mitigate them using people, right? And when I transitioned from project flow assurance engineer into operational flow assurance engineer, it was that key insight for me was, wait a minute, how do I know they're actually doing these things, right? I mean, i.e., if a well shuts in, you need to be pumping methanol here and here within this amount of time. If a subsea system shuts in, you need to circulate that out with dead oil by this amount of time. How do I know that's happening, right? And what I found was there's no way to validate that. And if I wanted to validate it, it would take quite a bit of information to bring in. And I think, what I did was the first time I realized that we had a shutdown and, came in the morning, I asked, hey, did you all circulate? Yeah, we did. Did you do it within the 12 hours or whatever the time was? And they said, oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, we documented it.
And I'm a big believer in verification, right? And to me, in the digital twin, there's a piece of verification here, right? Is I've got procedures that tell me this is what should be happening. Should be happening. That's the key. This should be happening. How do I know it's happening? That's where the twin comes in, right? And I need a process to validate these things. I actually created a spreadsheet. Again, it's all spreadsheets that actually would query once a day where certain events would happen. A well would shut in, a subsea system would shut in, or the entire plant would shut in. And basically, if those events happen, it would then pull new data to determine based on valve positions, pump rates, whether we actually did the things we're supposed to do. And so I would get a report every morning that would say, we had 2 wells shut in for pressure buildup test or whatever. And at 3.6 hours, they pumped this much methanol here, that much methanol there, right? And so it would kind of tell me so I could validate, yep, they're doing that, they're doing that. And if it would be over the time, because, and this would be for hydrate control, and hydrates are stochastic. So you may get away with it this time, but maybe next time you won't. I could now have a conversation in that morning meeting with the operator saying, hey, FYI, when well XYZ shut in, thanks for pumping the methanol. That's absolutely needed. We do need to do that a little sooner next time, and so on and so on, right? To help keep that system running. But without verification tools, you never know. I've been part of way too many flow assurance incident response teams in which I've learned a lot from that, right? And how do I codify that learning? Well, the learning is typically you find out after the fact that you weren't pumping enough, right? Whether it be a hydrate plug in a dry tree well, that, you know, the mitigation for hydrates was within 6 hours of the well shutting in, you need to pump 1,000 barrels of oil, dead oil, down that riser. I think in one incident, we found that the pump was actually underperforming and they were only pumping about 500 barrels in. They didn't know that because the meter was off, and you know, it's better to find those things before the incident than during an incident to pull all that data and find it there, right? And so to me, that's where those learnings can go, right? Because a lesson learned in a database somewhere in a document that says, hey, make sure you're pumping the right amount, that's not useful for anybody. Everyone thinks they're doing the right thing, so they're not going to latch on to that. And so to me, if you had a means for coding this stuff up to validate that you're doing the things you need to do, you know, you're 80% of the way there.
So actually what we're saying is, this is, rather than the definition of a digital twin, this is like the goals of it. We're actually saying, okay, you might have this basic system here, it covers all your data. Yeah, that's a digital twin. But actually we've moved away from that and we're saying, whatever it is, the goals of it are that you need to start to do this. And these examples you're giving, you could do those before, but what you're saying was it was actually quite difficult to do. You were having to invest a lot of time to go find that information. And then because you had specific skills to be able to code VBA and connect them to systems, you could automate some of that. But if we had a platform where that data was much more easily accessible, then the time taken to do that analysis would be much, much quicker.
Not only would the time taken be much quicker, but you could actually replicate it across the board.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
If I've got 50 sites around the world, I can now say, you know what, my lesson is to do this, or my lesson is this. The action, instead of make sure everyone knows about this lesson, which is a typical action, like train people, which lasts about a week, if that long, is actually you're codifying it by saying, you know, making the action go and create this verification across all of our systems that are applicable.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Well, so then if you could write the code in terms of the abstract knowledge of how a well works, so that it doesn't need to speak to the specific tag in the Honeywell or the SetSim or whatever control system, it's like check wing valve or flow meter, oil flow. It's talking in concepts related to this piece of equipment. Then your algorithm could be transferable.
Yes.
Because now it doesn't have to be rebuilt for every single asset. If all the mapping's been done, like you were describing earlier, the relationships are there, then you could write something at a more semantic level of how to do something. And I don't care where you get the data from, but you need the methanol injection flow rate, and you need the wing and master valve and the routing valve on the manifolds, those kind of things.
Yeah, so I think, you know, exactly. So your action's coming out of a lesson out of that. It's the algorithm.
Yeah, the algorithm, and you write it once.
Now it's up to those folks to either, depending on how you have your data set up. I mean, if it's very structured, it could be as simple as do it everywhere, which I think is probably too much perfect, right?
Yes, that's
because you're going to spend forever
21.
doing your data. Yeah, you're going to be spending forever working on getting your data right before you get any value. You can get value pretty quick, right?
Yeah.
Here's the algorithm, and for each site, you need to put in the appropriate tags. For each well, I need to know all the tags for, you know, these different tags for that well. And then once you have that, the algorithm just runs, right? You know, I do think, you know, another view I have of the digital twin is kind of a layered approach, which I think has changed as well. And, you know, if I think about that data, having the data available as a layer of, okay, here's all the data, which is much more accessible now. I think that second layer, which I think many companies are getting into, is, is, okay, what does that data mean, right? And I think those, I will say that those tools exist today that you can sit on top of that data, in which you can write what I would say just are simple rules. I think machine learning is great, but I think simple rules are good enough, at least to get most of the value, right? Simple rules like, you know, if this does this, then it's an issue, right? This pressure gauge needs to be within here and here. That pressure gauge, and this flow meter are related through this equation, right? Those type of things, right? And so now you can actually tell the system through this layer how the system should be operating, right? This temperature should be between here and here. If the rate on this compressor goes up, then the temperature should go up as well, right? And it should go up approximately on this curve, right? Because we have these types of curves. And it's not using sophisticated simulators. I mean, you can use pretty basic engineering to determine those things. Once you have that, throw all the machine learning in to get the rest of it, right? Because physics, you can't solve any of the equations if you keep all of the partial differentials in there, right? You have to start saying, that's negligible. Now I can solve it.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
You know, but that next layer is, you know, so now I've got, and this, that layer 2, I would say, is where I would say a lot of folks are going, which is, you know, that control system, that control loop. You know, I can replicate what it should be doing, and therefore, as an engineer, go in and look at it and say, it's actually doing something that it shouldn't be doing. It needs to be retuned. Okay, so that's the value of layer 2, is you've given your engineers, basically, you've given them that data and they've been able to put their rules and logic onto it. That layer 3, or that next step, and this is kind of the process I told you earlier, just in my own experience, is really about, okay, how can I get this? There's still way too much to look at, right? I mean, even a simple upstream production system is not as simple as, certainly not as simple as I thought it'd be as a chemical engineer, right? I trained on like refineries and chemical type of plants. And I was always told, it's just, you know, it's a big dumb system. It's not big and dumb, I can tell you that. You know, so, and there's way too much to look at, right? I had 10,000 tags in my system, or in my spreadsheet, that would get run. And ultimately where I got to is, oh crap, there's too much to look at. And which one should I look at first? And so instead of let me look at it, and, you know, I initially went down the visual path of, you know, I'll just have it tell me red, yellow, or green, and I'll focus on the reds. And you know, it went to more of a, let me use this to tell me what to look at, right? Not just by color, but actually notify me when there's the issues. So in other words, if I don't hear about it, it's fine, right? And it narrowed my scope down quite a bit by doing that. I knew within, you know, by the time I sat down and had my cup of coffee, or was drinking my cup of coffee in the morning, I knew what my day was going to look like. And, you know, and then ultimately with level 4, and this is kind of another layer on top of it, it's being able to now, you know, what I noticed was after a few months, you know, I'm continually doing this every time this does this. I started codifying that in, going, well, wait a minute, you know, why am I having to come up with the same recommendation each time? Let me just codify. If all these things happen, then here's what needs to happen. You know, subsea operator, please go check the, you know, the bypass valve on this chemical, or whatever that recommendation is, or that action is. And so you could, I kind of getting back to kind of that view, is I really see it more in a layered system that, and I don't see it ever ending, to be honest, because, you know, each layer is going to need new information, right? I don't need to determine whether this transmitter is out of its normal operating. I don't need a cause and effect for that. I do need a cause and effect if I want to start developing recommendations when these things are happening. What are the likely causes, and what's my confidence level on what it could be? if I want to prioritize actions, right? Because, you know, BP is no different than anyone else. We all have too much to do, right? There are always overdue actions. And every time you go into these action databases and look at what's overdue and actually put a team on it, which I've done several times, what you find is many of them just didn't need to be done. And that was the recommendation from the team. And you investigate that a little further. And what you find is, oh, that was created 3 years ago. And they just put by the end of, 2020, this needs to be done, right? With no, they were just pushing it out, waiting for the next group. And so, by bringing in and more data, you can actually help prioritize these things with a digital twin. So what's that prioritization? Every company's going to have their own. Certainly in the upstream oil and gas business, a major portion of that prioritization is going to be your HAZOP LOPA, right? Does this impact the risk on my facility? If it does, by how much? This device, this shutdown valve, should be closing in 45 seconds. All indications are in 2 weeks, it's going to be closing beyond that based on, the data. So, that shutdown valve has this risk reduction factor with this risk. That would hold more priority than, we'll just say, a pressure transmitter that has redundant safety pressure transmitter, right?
Yeah. Or
so, but you have to have, yeah. I mean, you have to have the capability to add those layers to it, and I think that's what's changed as well is that capability. You can do it in Excel and VBA, which tells me I know we can do it. It's just a matter of how do we set that architecture up to, kind of get that entire workflow through, as opposed to focus on one thing and then focus on the other and then focus on the other. It's never ending.
I think that's exactly right. And you can see examples of that all over the place where things have moved up in complexity, and what we end up with, I guess, is systems of systems. But the systems at the bottom are so well known and so solid that we don't think of them as a system anymore. They just become a thing. But I mean, cars are classics for this. If you actually lift the bonnet, what you find is loads of modules that are there to do a thing, but they're just a complete unit, and you plug it in. It's maybe just a temperature or some feed into the main car's brain, but it actually is a system within itself. So we're always moving up, and we just bank, I guess, our experience before that. So this raises another question, because literally last night we had a question come in on how we can demonstrate data quality and veracity in our systems that people are acting on. So it's an audit from PSA coming in to say, oh, that's very nice. How do you know it's right? And because we've now got things that are doing exactly as you say, pulling all this data together and giving a view on it. And it's a risk view. Actually, it's saying, here's your risk posture. So quite rightly, the PSA going, well, that's very nice, but how do you know it's accurate? Yeah, that's right.
Well, and fortunately or unfortunately, depending on what side you're on, you can keep asking, yeah, but how do you know? Yeah, but how do you know? And, one digital twin I remember creating, it was called My Integrity, right? So I was a flow assurance engineer, but I'll just be honest with you. I took that as anything that would prevent flow is in my sphere of accountability. So I had an integrity spreadsheet that was primarily looking at the integrity of the facility, because if we have a leak, it shuts down flow. So that's within my accountability. I tend to step out, as far out as I can, and I rely on people stepping on my feet stepping on my feet saying, get out of my space to come back. And it's primarily because I don't want to miss anything, right? But that came up in that space. And I would say corrosion monitoring is a great example, right? When you think about all the data, all the things you do to prevent internal corrosion on steel. I've got corrosion inhibitor. I've got corrosion probes. And when I say corrosion, I'll say corrosion and or erosion. I've got erosion probes here on the wells. I've got them on subsea jumpers. I've got them at the surface. I've got inline corrosion resistivity probes all over the place. I have topsides corrosion inhibitor. I have corrosion coupons that get pulled on a quarterly or more basis. And all that data is coming in. And different people are looking at the different data sets, right? And, I also, on Thunder Horse at least, we had, they were called field signature method monitors, right? These big spools with external pins on them, looking at resistivity across pins to look for metal loss. And what we found is that any one piece of that data was not enough to act on. And you had to bring all that data together to get kind of a systems view of it. And it started with the premise that no one piece of data is completely accurate, right? Even though my corrosion coupon folks were saying, no, we measured it down, the weight of that coupon down to, the whatever degree, you could step back and say, yeah, but it's a corrosion coupon that's sitting in line that isn't equivalent to the same type of flow that's happening on the edge of the pipe. So is it really, yeah, you measured it very precisely, but is it a representation of what's happening? That was less precise, I would say.
Yeah.
And so you really had to bring all this together to actually make judgments. And I started doing that more when I started getting into the engineering manager role, because what I realized was, yeah, any one piece of data, you need that second piece. Even if they just calibrated something, that one sensor, you could still question whether it was accurate. Is it really accurate?
Yeah.
And so that's where you could use, if this pressure sensor here, was just calibrated, and I want to verify that, that's reading what it should be reading, you have to start thinking of different ways to estimate what that would be, right? And another way would be, well, I have this pressure and I have the rate, so let me use Bernoulli's equation to tell me, this pressure is this, the rate is this. Yes, those have inaccuracies, but based on the numbers they show, it shows that this pressure transmitter should be around this, within this, with this range. And if it is, it gives you not 100% confidence, but it gives you more confidence that it's not way off. I can tell you that. Right.
Yeah. So that's a classic example of all the additional information that's held in an engineer's head when he looks at stuff, contextual data, as well as physics. And some of that exists in documents, the fact that it's on this pipe and the flow goes in this direction. But then others of it is it's not documented anywhere. It's just because of the fact it's fluid, Bernoulli's equation applies, I guess. And so that makes me think again, the digital twin, another definition is, no, not a definition, a use of it. It's like a home for all this additional information. Or because the other thing that you described there is that you get a piece of data, but then it goes on a journey. And it picks up metadata as it goes. And this is actually a big difference between the spreadsheet way of doing it, because when it's in the spreadsheet, it's the bit of data. But when it's in a cloud-based digital twin environment, you see the data, but behind it's all this metadata saying what the system is it came from, possibly the equipment related to it. That there's like a whole set of stuff hanging just out of view, but that you can access if you need to and that can give you traceability of stuff. We have a concept called status context in the barrier panel that allows us to take a piece of information and tag it with a context, like where it came from. But then when we calculate something from that it keeps its context. So it picks up all this baggage as it goes along. So when you get the result, you can always unpack it and see where it came from. I think that's a big difference from the old way of doing stuff where you have an Excel tool that gives you your answer that you need to act on now, because you know all the rest, so it's fine. But if you wanted to hand that information to another system, you'd need to add all your knowledge with it so that someone could deal with it in a in an appropriate way, I guess.
Absolutely. And, you know, you started that piece with, you know, it's almost like a home for that data. And that's kind of how I see it as well. Again, I think I've got way too many frames for way too many things, because I think it's valid for different conversations. But, you know, the layered approach, or the layered type of approach, frame, is what I latch onto most. Is that, you know, it's having all that data housed. And again, you know, depending on what your role is, that data is going to be completely different. It may be design documentation, right? It's all kinds of, it could be maintenance history. It could be maintenance, the forward plan for maintenance. It could be process data. You know, and I think the digital twin is certainly where all that data is housed, but it's also those algorithms that do something with the data. It's the connection, you know, whether it's a graph model or not, but it's the connection of all that data to make it relevant. And then that, you know, that the other layers that go onto it is the ability to actually, what does that mean? You know, it's almost like, it's almost like the twin is the answer giver, right? I just need to ask it the question. And if it can't answer a question that I've asked, then I need to code that up into the twin in one of those layers, right? And so it needs to have that capability, because the use case is going to be different for anybody, right? I mean, if you're a construction planner, your digital twin is a 3D representation of the facility, right? That's what I need as a construction planner to be able to plan that job. You know, I'm going to need scaffold that's 30 feet up. I don't have access underneath, or I'm going to need rope access. And you know, those are the types. I'm going to have to do a lift because there's a laydown area to go over to here. Mm-hmm. You know, that would be their application of it, but the same process applies, right? There's as-built dimensional information of that facility. There is, you know, and I would say that next step is, how do I get kind of a more accurate view of what's happening now than going back to as-built documents, right? And that's where, you know, and we won't go this direction, but that's where you can get into robotics, right? It's as my means for continually updating my dimensional understanding of my facility, the condition of my facility, whether it be integrity and external integrity. But I mean, even if you take this into the economics space, right? I mean, you know, I've when I was an executive assistant, all the financial memorandums would come through my desk first, and I would, you know, the executive I supported said, I need your opinion on all these, right? Which is a great learning. And, you know, I've seen dozens of them come across. When you back out and you see what it takes to create something like that, to do the economics and what's the NPV at this discount rate, and based on the variability of the reservoir and so on, there is a lot of work that goes into that, right? And the reality is none of the fundamental data has changed. And so I can even conceptualize, I mean, this digital twin concept it's not just for a facility, here's the process, here is the workflow to build this, to create this, whether it be a financial memorandum or a production facility. And it's a means to be able to code up all those steps that happen in that process. So, and the output is even better, right? The output now becomes, not only is it quicker, but because it's quicker, I can make better decisions, because I know that information is more real time, right? Instead of grabbing data, if it's a 3-month process to get a financial memorandum up to date, well, in 3 months, I probably drilled another prospect well, you know, and I don't have those results inside this. And so now you're having a conversation on, should I invest further in this on bad data, or, which is more likely, you're having a conversation on this financial memorandum, which I've already read and I have my biases now. And then you're coming into the room saying, yes, but let me get you up to speed over the last 3 months. And so you're bringing new information into the room and potentially making decisions that are biased or aren't real time, right? With real time data. So
Yeah.
So having a digital twin of these things allows you to basically get the broader context like that, if you set it up right.
But that's actually one of the most important things I think there is on the whole of digitalization, which is to get to a decision. And it's either the same decision you would have made before, but just quicker, or a better decision than you would have taken before. Because actually, if it doesn't lead to those things, it's just a fun project to work on, really.
No, it's really cool to have a simulator running against my system, right? But if I'm not getting value from it, then it is. It's just cool to look at.
It has to get you to do something. Yeah, that's exactly it. That's got to be the objective.
When you mentioned earlier, Murray, that, you know, I mean, look, the environment the upstream oil and gas business is in right now, you know, it's how do I get my operating costs down? And, you know, depending on who you talk to, it'll turn around and whatnot. But in the end, it is about getting your operating costs down, and your twin allows that as well, right? Is if I've got, you know, 100 engineers that are having to go in and look at data and respond when things are going wrong, the more I can codify that, the less people I need, because now they're working by exception, right? If I got in my twin, if I've got a transmitter, let's say I've got paired transmitters, 2 transmitters, one's a safety transmitter, the other's a control. I use it to control that system. I know just through simple logic that those 2 should be reading approximately the same thing because they're within inches apart. And if they're not reading the same thing, something's wrong. And based on if they're not reading the same thing, I can actually, if I were to trend them, I can determine which one's likely off, right? If one of them just tagged to the high, that's likely that failed, right? And if they just gradually trended off, I could use some physics based on that process to estimate which one's actually, you know, drifting. And based on that, I can actually determine what type of action needs to happen, right? If it's completely tagged out at the top, it's likely we need to replace that transmitter. If it's drifting, it's likely we just need to recalibrate it. If it's drifted over and over the last several months, because I'm pulling my maintenance records, then it's likely I would just say, just replace the dang thing. The amount of time for examples like that engineers are putting into the system, if you will, you know, the example I just gave, I can give you the data. If I had a digital twin, I can determine when that's happening. I can do the querying to determine what the likely cause is and which transmitter it is. And I can pull maintenance data as well to determine what the action needs to be. And all I need to do is codify that up once and get 90+% of when I've got transmitters that are out of or either out of calibration or broken, right? And automatically get that into my maintenance system.
Yeah.
And again, using other information, I can actually put a priority on that. Does that need to be fixed today, in the next month, or get to it when you can, right? And I no longer need the hours that an engineer spent on that. And so you want to look at a way to get your operating costs down, it's your overhead. Yeah. It's that overhead cost. Unless someone's using a Ouija board or a crystal ball to actually make decisions, and if they are, I would probably focus there.
Sell shares immediately.
But if they're not using that, they're using fundamental rules and logic. Codify it.
That can be codified.
What the digital twin enables. So.
Yeah. I think that's an excellent summary. I think we can stop that discussion there. I might stop the recording. We can carry on chatting afterwards because there's already loads of editing there and there's some really cool stuff.
Huge thank you, Adam, for your time. It's been a fascinating conversation, and we've had many conversations about digital twin, but it's really great to hear it from your perspective. But yeah, so thank you so much. And for anybody who's obviously listening or watching the video, then, you know, if you've got any questions at all, then by all means pop them below, and we'll get back to you as quickly as we can. So thank you so much.